welcome to Think, Engage, Thrive, our show on entrepreneurship, and where we showcase some of the most inspiring and innovative entrepreneurs. So if you've ever thought about starting your own business, you should watch and listen, because we're going to tell you the good, the bad, the funny, all kinds of stories about startups. But in reality, not those frou-frou stories you hear. These ones are pure. And tonight we're thrilled to have with us Brian Razzaque, a veteran of many startups. And so we're going to bring Brian in now. Yeah.
Hey, Phil, thanks for having me.
So, let me turn that off. Brian, thanks for being here. You founded some outstanding companies. VMT Technologies, which was an early entrant in the development of websites and other products. SocialToaster, which has been around now for what, like over 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
BrandTrellis. So give us a bit of background, your entrepreneurial journey. Where'd you start? What was your inspiration? The big question, why you started? Because it looked like you went to Johns Hopkins, you got this education in computer science as well as biology. I mean, sort of a unique path to get into entrepreneurship or starting your own business.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, again, thanks for having me. Appreciate the chance to be on your show and chat about it. I went to Johns Hopkins University and got degrees in biology and computer science. And I started my first company there as a student. This was mid 90s. And the dot-com boom was happening, and I had a chance to, before I even started my business, I had a chance to be a computer science teaching assistant as a freshman. I was involved in computers, and they had a need, and so I was one of the youngest teaching assistants ever, and that got me a little bit of visibility between with the faculty and with some of the different students, and just through word of mouth, people started asking me, can you help us? This dot-com boom is going on. Everybody wants to be on the internet. They want to sell stuff. Nobody knows how to do it. You seem like you might know. Would you be interested in helping out? And so I started, just sort of stereotypical, like you hear in the dorm room.
Yeah.
Working, took on a couple clients and got some friends of mine, and we started building websites for people. And that grew as I was throughout my entire academic career, so that by the time I graduated, I had 8 full-time employees. And, when faced with the question of should I stay on and go pursue either a master's degree or something more advanced or dive into being a business owner, I decided to go ahead and just jump straight into running my own business. So by the time I graduated, like I said, my company already had 8 employees, and we sort of hit the ground running. But I graduated in 2000, so that was right at the tail end of the boom. So one of my first sort of interesting lessons learned was, the economy took a sharp nosedive, if you remember those days. I know
I do.
You were around, right? So, here I am, like a 21-year-old kid. I've got, went from 8 employees up to, I think we had about 20 or so over the course of a couple months. And one of our larger clients was, we had a whole office down in DC, which had 8 people just at that location doing contract work for NBC Interactive. And one day I got a call saying the 95% of the budget for NBC Interactive was being cut. And we appreciate everything you've done for us, but we need you to close down this office, and we just want you to have the one key person here to help transition things along. And so, I had never fired anybody, and so I didn't know how to do that, and I didn't know how quickly I should move on that. And So I kept them all on board thinking, oh, this is not that big of a deal. We'll find a place for them. We'll find a home for them. And in 2 short months, burned through all the cash that I had built up and ended up having to lay off not just those people, but a bunch of additional people as well. And so that was a hard school of hard knocks thing right out of the gate. You know,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and you ask the question like, how do you get started? And I teach some tech class on entrepreneurship, and I think most businesses, most particularly small businesses, start because you have a talent or a knack for something, and it's very specialized. It's very focused in one area. Doesn't necessarily mean business is something you should pursue as a whole, because there's so many other aspects of it that you need to learn as you go or have a background. So for me, everything I've learned has been a bit of a school of hard knocks. So I learned the hard way, that there are ups and it's great, but when the downs come, you gotta respond to it. You gotta be prepared for it. You gotta deal with it. So the funny thing about that is after I let those people go, I had kept them going. And again, keep in mind, I'm 21 years old at the time.
Yeah.
So payroll, I had delayed filing payroll taxes to try to keep these guys paid. Yeah. And so I got a little upside down with the IRS owing some payroll back taxes.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, a couple months after this goes down, the front page of our local business journal comes out with a headline that says, "The tax man cometh."
Oh, geez.
And my picture right on the front page of the newspaper. So that was rough. That was a little.
Yeah, that's a near-death experience.
Yeah. So that was not fun. But those are the types of things that I think that's what your show is all about, right? Like those are the types of things that you learn from and you grow. And so so I recovered from it. Never didn't actually go into bankruptcy or anything. We learned that lesson and scaled back and kind of dug out of it and got things going again. And that company did custom web application development. And so grew that into ultimately a nice sized consulting firm. We were one of the largest web application development firms in the Mid-Atlantic region. And around 2004 or so, we started, economy's recovering. We're starting to experience the real estate boom. And one of the first sort of actual true startups that I launched that was more focused on a product, I built up a platform called 3XMS. And that was a mortgage management solution for companies that dealt with, that were mortgage brokers. And they needed there was a solution that was a desktop solution that was designed for smaller businesses, smaller mortgage brokers that didn't really scale very well. But at this time, this boom was happening. So all these mortgage brokers were starting out as small shops and then suddenly growing to 40, 50, 100 people. Yeah. And they had no way to take the data from this desktop application and aggregate it up at an enterprise level so they could see what was going on. So I built some software that tied all of that together and self-funded, built it out of my web shop and spun it off as a standalone company, and invested around $250,000 of my own money to get it going, and had 99 customers. We were starting to think about looking at some venture funding. Yeah. And then the real estate market crashed. So I had all 99 of my customers went out of business within a 90-day span of time. So that was a short-lived venture. But through it all, I had my consulting firm and continued to kind of grow that. So recovered from that startup, but I still had my other business going. And then came up with an idea for when social media started coming around. So this is now late 2000, 2008, 2009, going to 2010. And social media, Facebook was starting to move from being a personal sort of, something that college kids were doing into, now there's something we can do for businesses. And, I had my consulting firm, and we were blogging to get traction on search engines and, establish ourselves as thought leaders and all the stuff you're supposed to be doing. But one of the things I realized was that, we were publishing all this content online, but none of our employees were actually sharing it out to their social networks. So I asked them one day, I said, hey, we have this blog. Would you guys be willing to share it? And in fact, one of the guys who worked with me, it was his idea. He came to me, he said, I realize you update our blog pretty regularly. I never know when it's getting updated. Could you just let me know? And I kind of had one of those aha moments. Like, of course we should be letting our employees know what we're publishing. Of course they should see it. And of course they should be sharing it. Right. And so I asked them, would you guys be willing to share? And they all said, yeah, sure. Of course. We're happy to do it. So next blog post we published, I sent everybody an email and said, hey, here you go. We published to the blog. Can you please go share this to LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever? And most of them did it. And then the second time after that we updated it, I sent another notice. Hey, guys, we've updated our blog. Can you share it? Maybe a third of them did it. Yeah. By the time the third blog post gets published, I was lucky if I got one or two people to log in and share it. And the hard part was every time they did that, I'd have to log in and look and see who actually shared it, right? And so that was my idea for SocialToaster, which was that, there's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be a way to make the sharing process easier. There has to be a way to remove the friction from the sharing process and make it so that people can, and as an owner, make it so I can see what's going on. So that was the idea for SocialToaster. And so we built a platform to do just that. And so that's what SocialToaster does. Again, self-funded to get it started, raised some friends and family money. And then in 2012, we raised a Series A round and spun it off as a standalone company. And then that has been my primary focus since doing that. We'd end up raising a Series B round in 2016 and continue to just focus on this issue of how do you make it as an organization, how do you make it so your stakeholders can easily share content. Now it does all kinds of other stuff. We can run social media contests. If you want to do prizes or sweepstakes or giveaways, we can do that. We can help recruit fans to support a brand. And we've been fortunate enough to work with everybody from, in TV shows, we promote TV shows, movies, music, a lot of stuff in the entertainment industry. We've been fortunate enough to promote professional sports teams, a lot of consumer programs, food and beverage. So that's been exciting. That's been really something very interesting. But even that has a lot of ups and downs. So so those are a couple things. But in the meantime, I've continued to advise other startups. My wife and I launched a consulting firm that's an agency that works with brands to help do lead generation. So taking a lot of the lessons learned from scaling up and building up SocialToaster to help promote other similar sort of tech companies, help them identify leads and ramp up and scale their businesses. And then, work with other startups to help them navigate the waters. So how do you deal with fundraising? How do you, deal with the board? That sort of thing. So active in a number of areas, but it's definitely been interesting. So that's a brief overview of some of my background.
Yeah, that's a show unto itself on fundraising because in working with a lot of young startups at University of Maryland School of Entrepreneurship and some of the incubators, in downtown Baltimore and stuff. Some of these guys get I think, a unrealistic view of what it takes to raise capital. And I think people read these stories about how, this company went out and raised $100 million, or this company went out and raised, $200 million. They don't realize what has to go into that to get there. They think, some of these young guys that we talk to are, they write a good business plan. They think they're going to get in front of a bunch of investors and everybody's going to start writing checks and throwing money at them. And it never works that way. At least it never has for me. So,
Yeah, it's, you and I are both primarily on the East Coast, which is its own ecosystem, very, very different potentially from what they experience on the West Coast and sort of the Bay Area. But I totally agree with you. I think that it is interesting because, ever since the dot-com boom, entrepreneurship, being an entrepreneur, and there's been this association with this idea of raising money. That they should go hand in hand. If you're not raising money, are you really successful? Did you really come up with a great idea? And that's obviously not necessarily the case. Like, you don't necessarily have to raise money in order to be successful, but the environment sort of seems to indicate that you should, right? And so, but it's also interesting because, like, most entrepreneurs are not, they're not athletes, they're not, movie stars, but it's interesting that there's a unique sort of, entrepreneurs are somewhat rock stars in their own right, largely associated with this idea, how much money have you raised, right? Like, and so, I think there's this notion for young entrepreneurs in particular that you got to come up with an idea, and you got to go raise a lot of money, and that's a necessary component in order to really be successful. And it's not only do you not necessarily have to raise money, and if you do have to raise money, there's so many strings that come attached with it, but it's also very, very challenging. It's a very difficult thing to do. So, I definitely, that's one of the biggest things whenever I talk to students. It's the same thing. They all want to know, like, what does it take to raise money? And there's a whole, like you said, you can have an entire show just on whether you should. If you do, how should you do it? Who do you have on board? Where's the best places to raise money? Who are the best investors to have? You can spend hours just on that topic.
Well, one of my upcoming guests in a couple of weeks is a guy who does that. He's a private equity guy, but he's also a bit of an entrepreneur. And, I think that'll be interesting to hear his take on it. But, a couple of weeks ago, we had someone on, and they built their business to be a lifestyle business. So they're profitable in what they do, but they're content and happy at generating cash for themselves and not having to raise capital and live sort of this lifestyle that they want to live, which is, they can travel wherever they go because they've sort of built their business to be, virtual. So they can, live, they can travel, they can do all kinds of things. They're not interested in building a billion-dollar company. They're perfectly happy generating cash and running a business that's profitable and providing them with a lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, for a lot of, young entrepreneurs that are looking to start a company, they focus on the amount of that initial raise, right? Like that is the benchmark by which they sort of judge their own potential success, right? And so, the environment's shifted. It used to be when I was raising money, a seed round was maybe, $500,000 to maybe $2 million. A Series A round was maybe $2 million to $10 million. Series B is $10 million or more. Now you hear about these seed rounds that are in the millions, or a Series A round that's 20 million or 40 million, right? These just insane numbers. And, most young entrepreneurs don't necessarily know how to evaluate that, to think about what's on the other side, right? Because investors that are throwing that kind of money at you, particularly if you're dealing with venture capital, right? Angel investors typically are looking for like a 3x return.
Yeah.
So you raise $2 million from angel investors, you want to sell your company for $6 million, that's pretty doable potentially, right? But if you raise a $10 million Series A round,
Yeah.
and you've got VCs that want a 10x return, you've got to turn around and sell your company for $100 million. That is a much higher, much loftier goal to realistically try to achieve. And as an owner, when you think about, well, what does that mean for me? And you sort of do the math and figure out, okay, well, how much am I going to get diluted down when I raise this? What's my ownership percentage? Even if we're successful at $100 million raise, let's say it takes you 5 years to get here. By the time you've done that raise, let's say you own, 10% of the company, right? Just kind of figuring out the math to say, okay, well, if this happens and my ownership percentage is this, and we actually accomplish it, yes, absolutely, you can do great, right? So, but when you start to think realistically, okay, well, what if we only get a 4x return or
Right.
3x return, and I spend, a certain number of years pursuing this, and my opportunity cost is I could go work doing something else, or could be a consultant doing something, right? And make a steady income, like you said, with a lifestyle business, so let's say $1 million a year. Like, what's going to be more valuable to you? I have a good friend of mine who is a programmer in New York.
Yeah.
Works for a very large bank, and he does extremely well for himself, right? I mean, he's between his base salary and bonuses, he's typically taken home between 700 and 1.2 million a year. But he's loved the idea of being an entrepreneur. So he regularly was asking me, what about this idea? What if I pitch this? What if, what do you think the valuation would be if I did this? What if I solve? So he nailed down a very specific problem that he thought he could solve, that's actually relevant to the driving, the growing self-driving car industry. And he did the math, and after like literally years of asking me what I thought about this idea, nailed it down. He spent a couple months going back and forth with me to flesh out a business plan. Like, was to the point where he'd actually built a prototype, was ready to go raise money, and then had like this wake-up moment when he realized that if he actually quit his job and hit all of his metrics and actually raised money at the valuation he thought he would do, and was successful, and let's say spent 5 to 7 years getting it to a point where he had an exit, he realized he would not make as much money as if he just stayed employed at his really phenomenal job for that same amount of time.
Yeah.
And the risk was that much greater, right? Like the risk of failure was that much, greater. So he ended up shelving the whole thing and just stayed at his job.
I can't blame him. I've been there. I've toiled away at startups that I could have gone to work for somebody else and, made a heck of a lot more money at the end of the day. But, it's when we built the Daily Market in DC, we had 3 stores, and we went out looking for money, and we met with Jerome Kohlberg, Cravis and Roberts, but he had separated out and he had his own firm, and his son, Jim Kohlberg. And we went up for a meeting with them. They were looking to invest in us, but more importantly, they owned a business similar to ours that they wanted to try and put together. That was their motivation for taking the meeting. And they said to us, it wasn't going to work after we talked about it for about an hour and a half. And they said, we don't really do anything unless we can write a $10 million or more check. It just doesn't pay. So because the legal fees involved with doing a deal are just so expansive that, it doesn't work. The metrics don't work unless we're doing 10 million or more,
Right.
So, and then when you start getting involved with, you're right. When you start getting involved with A rounds and dilution, and not just that, but the warrants that come along with it. So, they're going to take preferred stock, and then they have warrants on the common stock. And then, I mean, we're getting into the weeds here a little bit, but then you wind up, everybody's gotten their money out, and you're the last ones to get paid in the event of an acquisition. So it's
and I think, and that's the other sort of challenge in this space in general, being an entrepreneur, particularly when you're raising money, is, everybody thinks about the win. What if it's not a grand slam? What if it's not a home run? Even if it's a single, where do you end up with it? And, more importantly, if it doesn't take off or go the way that you want, how exposed are you? Where does that leave you? Those are all considerations that have to be, have to be faced, have to be dealt with. So
I got to take a 2-minute break,
okay.
And then we'll be right back.
Are you crypto curious? Maybe it's a little too scary for you to get involved in all this crazy Bitcoin cryptocurrency stuff. Join me, your host, Charlie Stivers of Goose Live. Find us on Achieve TV Thursdays, noon Mountain Time, where we talk all things crypto.
Hey, welcome back. Our sponsor tonight is a hot sauce manufacturer, Dave's Gourmet. You may know him. They've one of the originators of Insanity sauce, which was for a period of time the hottest hot sauce out there. They've gone and made Ultimate Insanity, a million different ones. Ghost Pepper. They've got some great sauces, but I love hot sauce, not the really hot sauces, but hot sauce that gives good flavor, and they make fantastic product, and they're sponsoring this show. They also make great pasta sauces. They've got a line of olive oil, so you can get them on davesgourmet.com, or they sell on Amazon, or they sell in most grocery stores and Walmarts around the country. So check them out. We're going to bring Brian's back, and we're going to continue our conversation. And we were talking about raising capital. But I want to go back to, SocialToaster a bit, even VMT to a certain extent, because really when you started, one of the things that amazes me today is that, because I started my first e-commerce business in 1998, and it was, the world and the environment was so much different than it is today. You were building sites. We didn't have the WordPress products out there today. We didn't have Shopify. We didn't have all these sort of plug-in pieces. You were building sites pretty much total coding, correct? Or
the first sites we built were all built in something called Perl, which hardcore coders will know what that is, but newer programmers, if they've heard of it, have no idea how to use it. So, it was everything was custom. Everything was custom.
And you were only dealing with one screen, because we didn't have, today we have so many different screen sizes. You've got to make these sites responsive, and we didn't have that back then. And even shipping, like we were in the food business. We were doing meals, frozen meals, and some fresh products, but shipping was such a nightmare. I mean, that business got acquired by a grocery store chain, but it was a very difficult 2 years in our lives. So I can imagine some of the things you were doing, because I can imagine. I remember just trying to get a landing page built, or sending out emails or things like that. It was just so much more complex than it is today.
Absolutely. No, it was very, everything was manual. And it was quite a lot of work, but it's funny because, I've been fortunate enough, or unfortunate, had the misfortune of working with a lot of programmers, and no matter what, even today, they all want to build customs. Like, they all love custom. They want to build custom, right? And it was a big challenge, as a business owner and somebody who's trying to anticipate the future, when you start to see all these emerging technologies, trying to pick the ones that are going to dominate. But we were building websites from scratch for years, and when content management systems started coming out, so you have like Drupal and WordPress are two that we got pretty heavily involved with, and you may recognize those names today. Certainly WordPress should ring a few bells for people. But trying to get your programmers to think that they need to move to that and learn those systems was like pulling teeth. I mean, they had built all this custom stuff, and it's not unusual even today to talk to someone who, business owner who got connected with a coder, and you start asking what their website's built in, and it turns out it's totally custom. And so it's it definitely was a different environment, but the overall challenge is still, like, as a business owner, understanding the technology stack, finding the right technology partner, or hiring technology specialists to help support your dream. If you're not savvy yourself and really know the pros and cons of certain platforms, or why you might go in a certain direction with a technology, you can definitely find yourself, backed into a corner where you may be locked into working with a particular coder that's not necessarily a good fit long term, or where you have to scrap everything because they didn't think about scale, they didn't think about certain things. So the overall challenge of trying to work with a programmer and figure out what technology you want to invest in to try to scale and grow, still the same challenges today as it was building maybe some different names and some different acronyms, but the underlying problems are all still the same.
So you've still got SocialToaster, and now you've got BrandTrellis. And how are you juggling that? How are you managing that?
Well, BrandTrellis is my wife's company, so she's the one who runs that, and the team over there. I'm more of an advisor, sort of provide input and take my lessons learned on everything else and help to steer her in the right direction and grow that company. So that's more of a family business there. But yeah, no, I think as you are involved in, even if it's just one business, the underlying fundamentals of growing and scaling a business, it doesn't really change dramatically, whether it's technology or whether it's food and beverage or consumer product or whatever it is. Once you kind of start to understand the core principles, they apply pretty much universally. So the trick there really is just figuring out how to automate the systems that you're putting in place, how to make it so that you've got a good team around you that's able to implement and execute on. So I'm able to focus on SocialToaster and help advise my wife's company and help advise some of these other companies. But what I'm trying to convey to them is, have you thought about, like, your marketing, for example? How are you going to grow and scale your marketing to make sure your sales team has the leads that they need? And when you have your sales team, like, what's the technology that you have in place to manage your sales process so you actually have a scalable pipeline that you're managing to? I think for a lot of young entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that are just starting out with their own company, even if they recognize, like, I have a skill, but I need to figure out other aspects of the business, they might dive right into finance. Well, I don't know anything about bookkeeping, so I need to hire a CFO or a controller, right? But when you ask them about their sales process and their sales cycle and how are they going to sell, and this is a big thing that a lot of times investors will drill into when they're getting sales pitches, right? They see this model that shows us hockey stick growth, right? And then you start talking to this entrepreneur and they're like, well, it's going to be so exciting that people are just going to flock to it and it's going to go viral and we're going to get all, and they show this number. And when you start asking, okay, well, how exactly are you, like, what's the distribution channel, right? How much, what's the sales team that's going to be needed to support that? What's your sales cycle going to look like? They have no idea, so, those are the types of things that, I think you got to really, really focus on. But once you sort of have a broad sense of it, it applies to any business.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question. We deal with it, on the agency side where some of these brands think we put the product up on the website and people are just going to flock to it. we don't have to do anything. We don't have an advertising budget. We don't have a marketing budget. We don't have a plan. We try and explain it to them, but so we'll run some ads. Well, running some ads isn't really going to do it. But, I think a lot of times entrepreneurs, especially when they come up with a product, don't think about that. They don't think about the marketing of it, how I'm going to get it. They just believe so much in their product. They think everybody's going to just pick up on it immediately, make some social media posts. Everybody's going to get it, and we're going to sell millions of units. And it never turns out that way.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of that comes from, the stories, the success stories that get highlighted.
Yeah.
For every one of those, for every one entrepreneur that comes up with an idea that does in fact somehow go viral, or for every entrepreneur, a lot of people look at the Facebook story and they're like, well, Zuckerberg was able to retain, over 50% of the company. Like there's, hundreds of thousands of examples where that does not play out that way, right? And you can still be successful. It's just, it reinforces a lot of these perceptions about, how it's going to be, right? So,
yeah. Well, when we were in the razor business, it was tough. It was competitive, and it was very difficult to get traffic to the site, get sales, and we had to do some things. We did a promo with well, not a promo, but sort of a I don't know what you call it, but we offered Brian Wilson, who was a pitcher for the San Francisco Giants, who got traded to the Dodgers. We offered him $1 million to shave with our razors and shave his beard off, which we knew he would never do, but we didn't care. We just wanted the recognition from the press, and that type of stuff will get you, some orders. And everybody in the razor business, though, everybody was pointing out Dollar Shave Club and what they did with that video. And everybody acted as if Dollar Shave Club just came out, put out that video, and that was it. They didn't realize that Dollar Shave Club for 2 years was trying everything. They were trying things online. They were trying things on social media. They were trying to do things with some of the coupon sites, and nothing worked. And then they spent, I forget the number, $14,000 or $15,000 on that video, and that caught fire. And that's what made that company. It enabled them to raise money. It enabled them to get, I think they got 22,000 orders off that video right away. And, so it's things like that. You have to break through the clutter. You have to sort of put yourself out there a little bit, but it's still, you still have to figure out a way to get to the buyer, whoever that buyer is, whether it's a business buyer or consumer. And I think that a lot of times businesses don't think that way. They think I built the product, I'm going to put it out there, people are just going to love it, and they're not.
Well, and it's funny too, because obviously the sales side of it, as soon as we say you need to figure out sales, people nod their heads and say, of course you have to figure out sales, right? Even if these entrepreneurs aren't necessarily thinking about the exact mechanics or their sales process, it's somewhat intuitive that like if you can't sell, you don't have a business. But on the other side of it, you have the execution, right? Yeah. Like how do you deliver? Like, sometimes we'll say that's like a good problem to have, right? If we all of a sudden sell a bunch of stuff, or we find ourselves in a position where we've landed a deal that we've never necessarily delivered on. Yeah. Something of that size, there's the whole execution side of it. I remember, we had this one deal. I think I was telling you about this before. We had a pretty sweet deal that where we were promoting the movie Goosebumps, and we're super excited about it. And that's a brand that's a beloved brand, right? Like
sure.
There's an entire generation of kids that read these books, and R.L. Stine is extremely famous guy. And so at our office, we were so excited to be a part of this project to help promote this movie. And so as part of the promotion, we were going to give away, we coordinated with a production company. We were going to give away five total autographed DVDs, of the movie that were autographed by the author.
Right.
And so the promotion did great. We were excited when we landed the deal. We, ramped it up. We recruited 35,000 people to participate in this promotion, to join the sweepstakes, and I get to the tail end of it, and we had to announce the 5 winners. And so this was a process of identifying and announcing winners that we'd gone through a number of times. And we had a new director of account management who was overseeing the process, and he was relatively new to our company, and he tasked an intern actually with doing the notification, thinking he's sending out 5 emails, what could go wrong? And so this intern had only done this one other time and only notified winners one other time for a much smaller program. And he accidentally notified all 35,000 participants that they won the prize. And we, realized that within minutes that this had gone out, and immediately sent a retraction that went out in error. And we tried to triage the situation, but it was one of the biggest nightmares. I mean, we had to, on our dime, had to basically coordinate it with the client so that anybody who complained, we had to go ahead and still provide them with a copy of the movie. We were not able, obviously, to get every single one autographed, but it was months that we spent, cleaning up after that. And I think it cost tens of thousands of dollars, just direct expense for us to deal with anybody that had an issue and to try to keep the client happy. And it was, and the worst part was, like, R.L. Stine publicly tweeted that he did not like us. And so, we were all upset. Everybody on our team loved his stuff. And so then he was upset with us.
God.
So it was a hard lesson learned, but it comes back down to execution, right? We had run this process and we had done programs of that scale before, but it's the little things that you don't necessarily think about. It never, occurred to us that this could even potentially happen. And, so even as you grow and you scale, and let's say you solve the sales problem, when you're executing on your plan, you're implementing, what are the, safeguards you need to put in place? What are the processes you have to put in place? What are the things you're trying to mitigate or prevent from happening in addition to ensuring happen? There's a lot that goes along with it. So that was
never easy. Never easy. But that's one of those, that's one of those moments that at the time that it's happening, right? It's painful, but when you look at it, you look back at it, it's sort of a funny sort of moment. But
I ended up getting a Goosebumps shirt out of the whole deal.
Yeah.
And I jokingly will wear it around and tell my wife it's my $35,000 because you gotta laugh at it,
Oh, I do. Believe me. I look back on some of the things that I've done over the years, and I have no choice but to laugh, because if not, I'll cry. But yeah. So what's happening now? What's happening with some of the with SocialToaster? Where are you heading? Where are you going to take it to?
Well, so SocialToaster has been very interesting, because the underlying problem we've tried to solve of how do you get stakeholders that are invested in a brand or an organization to share content personally to their networks, that problem still does not have an elegant solution, even 10 plus years into us trying to address it. I mean, we have a process, we have a solution that works and scales. There are a handful of competitors in our space. There are many competitors that have come and gone. But that underlying problem is still one that most organizations struggle with and want to try to deal with. And, for us, one of the things, big lesson learned though, is, while it is a fundamental problem, the vehicle for solving it, the distribution channel, in this case, are these different social networks.
Right.
And so we are very dependent on them. And, every 2 years, there's some sort of change in the environment where the algorithms change for how they display stuff, or the policies change because something's happened. With Facebook and with Twitter, for example, after the 2016 election, they both spent about a year and a half doing a deep dive into how their platforms were potentially abused or leveraged to influence the outcome of the election. They both unilaterally came up with an assessment that said that Russian agents took advantage of the platforms and to try to spread disinformation. So in 2018, they radically changed their terms of service in terms of how you could share content and to what extent you could automate that process. And so, those types of changes for a platform like us are very disruptive, where, whatever you had in place that was working, suddenly, with little to no warning, there's a shift that makes it so whatever you're doing doesn't work anymore. And you have to pivot and figure out, okay, well, now that this is the new normal, what are we going to do? How do we deal with that? And so, we've every 2 years had to deal with these shifts in the environment. So, one of the things for us has been like, well, how do we potentially reduce the dependency on those types of vulnerabilities and focus more on like the content itself, and at the same time take advantage of these platforms. So that's been an art form, is trying to figure that out. Now, we've been fortunate enough that it's been some exciting times, right? Particularly with artificial intelligence. We started introducing AI into the platform about 2 years ago to be able to automate a good chunk of what the system does, and to be able to enable it to act more intelligently about finding the content and then targeting it for people most likely to share. But obviously, if you've been seeing anything on the internet, ChatGPT has been huge, because it's almost like wizard-like magic in terms of what it's capable of. And so we've been able to take advantage of that and integrate it into the system. So the stuff that's happening with artificial intelligence is pretty mind-blowing, and we're excited to have it integrated and be able to support what we're doing and do so. So things that we've been trying to do for a decade, we finally now can do very readily because of these recent advantages and advances in technology. But at the same time that that's happening, one of our big networks going through a little bit of a shift right now. Twitter is I don't even know, right? Like it's, at the same time we were trying to, like I said, play that dance of how do you reduce your dependency and take advantage of the networks. Twitter's, and I think, anybody that keeps an eye on what's happening with these different social networks and what's going on with Twitter's there's a lot of stuff that most people are aware of. They're seeing, the blue check, for example, that whole situation.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a potential new CEO coming in, but it's chaos over there. Their rumor is they're down to 1,000-ish employees. So trying to get support or trying to deal with anything is, who knows? But, they had a recent change just to how developers interact with their system, where all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, they announced something in February, but it wasn't clear when it was going to come out, and it wasn't as far as a change to their pricing and how developers were going to interact with it. And then they published it relatively abruptly at the end of March, and it impacted everybody. The entire ecosystem was hit with this price change that it went into effect almost immediately for most third-party solutions that use Twitter. And hundreds of, if not thousands of apps were all cut off, and then had to figure out how to navigate what was going on over there. And one of the things that made that interesting is that if you wanted enterprise level access that previously you may have had access to for either free or for a nominal amount, the price for that today, as of today, is $42,000 per month. Not $42,000 a year, $42,000 a month. So even companies like Microsoft have dropped Twitter from their ad platform. So that's something we're dealing with right now, and figuring out how to work through that. So the fun never stops, like I said, when you're dealing with some of these networks. But that's the vision for us is, we're focused on this problem of sharing, and we've narrowed our focus primarily to employee programs. Those work very, very well. It's the same problem I described as to why I came up with the idea, right? I had a company, I had employees, I thought they should share our content. And so, we've taken a long winding path to come back to that, where that's currently the primary focus for us, is helping organizations that are investing in content. They're creating, content online and on social media. And, they have this untapped resource of employees that should be or could be sharing and just aren't. And so we help to facilitate that. We've got an integration now with Slack and with Teams that makes it, those two platforms really have taken off through the pandemic, and with remote workforces and, the whole environment is ripe for us to, to be successful in that space. So that's what we're focusing on, is taking advantage of, this current environment post-pandemic with potentially a lot of remote workers, people you want to engage. How do you make it easy for them to share content and help promote what you're doing and stay engaged with what the company's doing? So that's the future for us, and we're moving down that path.
What is video? Has video changed anything about what?
Definitely. I mean, first and foremost, we're still a marketing platform, right? Like, where the benefit for using our system is not just that you get people talking about you and
Right.
sharing to their networks, but ultimately you want them to be promoting the company, either because you're hiring and you want to attract employees, or because you want to promote your product. And video's been huge. TikTok in particular, there's been a huge push in that direction. Instagram obviously was big with just
Reels.
visuals, right? Shifting from statuses and sharing to now focusing on a more visual sort of medium. And Instagram obviously does have its own, stories, and you can have video with Instagram, but TikTok, we're seeing a huge surge in demand, particularly for consumer products. And so, integrating that, and then how do you display that and take advantage of those videos in a way that makes sense for you as a brand is something we're seeing a lot of movement around. So yeah, video's huge right now.
Yeah. TikTok is it's a unique animal, because when you really look at and everybody wants to be on it, everybody wants to push content out to TikTok. And when you look at the user base, it's a very young user base, but there's a lot of, the way I look at it again was sort of what I was talking about before, when I was saying when we were in the razor business, Dollar Shave Club came out with their video, which was great and got them attention, and it got them sales. We tried to, get Brian Wilson to shave his beard with our razor. We got a tremendous amount of play off that for quite some time. And, I think that everybody is trying to figure out what to do on TikTok that breaks through the clutter, that sort of gets you to a different level. Like, if, what's the language, Duolingo, they've got this whole channel where they've got their Duolingo owl that sort of just goes around the office doing things, right? They're not trying to sell anything right away, right? They're not trying to get people to click on the website or anything. They just make these videos that people watch. And then when you're ready to, buy or get an app to teach you a language, Duolingo is sort of in the back of your mind, because they've done such a good job, I think, of, staying relevant with all those videos that they do. People enjoy them, and they get tremendous play, but not a lot of people can do it. I mean, it's really, you have to, I think, really be creative and think about a totally different approach to break through on TikTok and Reels to be.
Well, and I think that is the trick with the medium, is that videos are what people want to consume and are consuming.
Yeah.
And to do video well is its own sort of skill set. So you have a smaller pool of potential creators, right? Versus just creating written content or photographic content.
Yeah.
But if you want to then try to figure out how do you parlay the videos that you're creating, that these creators are producing, into something that can promote and support a brand in a way that feels authentic,
Yeah.
and organic, that's a challenge, right? Yeah. And so, you have a lot of content creators that are influencers or micro influencers that are, building this large following, and then they want to monetize it.
Sure.
But the second they sort of shift in and start, putting content, product placement in, they've got to consider, is that devaluing their brand? Like, is that actually going contrary to the very thing that maybe made them relevant and interesting, right?
Yeah.
And even if they do go ahead, even if they are promoting a brand, is that going to ultimately add value for that brand, right? Are they, not just are they potentially reaching the right audience, but just the way in which it becomes a bit of a wild card in terms of even how the content creator is going to produce or promote the brand. Is it going to be what you want as a brand? So it's its own sort of thing, working with content creators and trying to leverage video as a brand to but it is huge right now. So
yeah. Hey, we're almost out of time, Brian. Any last minute thoughts, any last minute words of wisdom to young entrepreneurs?
Well, so I'll tell you one other thing. I was chuckling a little bit because you and I have known each other for a long time. And in one of my early company, you introduced it as VMT Technologies. And I bring that up. It's funny because the company was actually called Vision Multimedia Technologies. And I jokingly tell my students all the time, that's what happens when you name your first company as a college kid in your dorm room, right? Like, I just took a bunch of buzzwords and I strung them together. I never thought about the consequences of, like, what's this going to look like as an acronym, or how people are going to say it, or what's my email address going to look like, right? And I had clients under that company that were clients of mine for 10 years that never knew the actual name of the company. Like, it'd be like VMT Tech or whatever. Most of them were just like, this is Razzaque, you should just go with it. Like, my last name was a better brand than VMT was. 3XMS was another one. Like, what does it even mean? And I was like, well, it's mortgage management. I forget what the third M was, but I was like, oh, it's a short domain name that I don't even remember what it stood for, Yeah. So, like, I would just say in closing, since you opened with a company, the brand itself, and you do a lot with brands, right? Yeah. If you're starting up a company, the value of your brand out of the gate cannot be overstated.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one thing I do get a lot of credit for. SocialToaster is a pretty catchy name. Yeah. I've had many people tell me that's a cool name. It sticks with them. It resonates. So, probably one of the best companies I've ever named is SocialToaster. So, spend a lot of time figuring out your brand, because it's going to stick with you one way or another.
That's right.
And so make sure you do it well.
All right, Brian, I appreciate you being here.
Thanks again for having me.
All righty. Hey, folks. Thanks for tuning in. And next week, we've got another great show coming up. And, Brian, I think, has a lot of experience, a lot of great tidbits. So, we'll see you next week.